Starting your Book of Shadows can feel intimidating. What should you include? How do you organise it? And is there even a right way to do it? Whether you're staring at that first blank page or wanting ways to reorganise your current copy, I'm here to help make it simpler, less overwhelming, and actually enjoyable. In this video, I'm walking you through everything you need to know to start and refine your Book of Shadows in a way that actually works for you. Hello everyone, my name is Mia, otherwise known as Ash and Rose, and welcome to my channel. I've had a few requests for this video and I'm quite excited to get into it. Today we're covering a Book of Shadows, how to create one, how to organise it, personalise it, and just simply how to start, because I know some people get quite overwhelmed. If you've been wanting to start your Book of Shadows for a while and you're feeling really intimidated, you're absolutely not alone. So we're going to cover this step by step, and I'll even be showing you glimpses of mine and how I lay it out, just to give you some inspiration. So let's get started. In very, very simple terms, a Book of Shadows is your personal record of your spiritual journey and magical research. It can contain spells, rituals, notes, divination results, dream interpretations, correspondences, basically anything that is involved in your practice and your discoveries, you will note that down in your Book of Shadows. The best way to think of a Book of Shadows, in my opinion, is as a sacred journal and reference tool tailored to you. Some people refer to their Book of Shadows as a grimoire, and whilst that's not wrong, there are some people who view them differently, so we will be laying out the differences. There are lots of similarities between a Book of Shadows and a grimoire. Both contain things like spells, rituals, and correspondences. However, Book of Shadows is actually a Wiccan term. It's a much more recent name for a magical journal. A grimoire is not associated with Wicca and has been used to refer to historical texts and books related to magic. In a modern context, some people refer to their Book of Shadows as an active working journal. It is more personal, emotional, and evolving. Whereas a grimoire is more structured and finalised and might be more of like a formal copy that you can hand down to possibly your descendants one day as a final copy, or other witches. Ultimately, whatever you call your spiritual journal is up to you. You could call it Dave for all I care. It does not matter. Unless you're following a traditional path, then it doesn't matter too much about what you call it, because it's your spiritual journey and research. I'm not Wiccan, but for ease of this video, I'm just going to call all of my documented research a Book of Shadows. Like I've mentioned, there is no one right way to do a Book of Shadows unless you're following a traditional path. It is just about what works for you. More traditional witches might argue that putting pen to paper is the most authentic way that you can do it, but I would argue that is a load of BS. With modern technology, there are just so many great alternatives, especially for people that might struggle to write or just want to be more organised and have flexibility. So there are two different format types, which are physical and digital. Physical being the more traditional option. Physical options could include things like a notebook, a journal, a scrapbook, a binder, and even loose leaf pages. This is usually a good option for creative people that like journaling as a hobby, or people that want something tangible that they can like flick through the pages of. Digital options can go on any of your devices, and it could be your Notes app, it could be Google Sheets, Excel, or my personal favourite is Notion, which is obviously a portable option because it can go on your phone and you can take it anywhere. It's easy to edit, reorganise, and it can also be discreet and password protected. So if you're unsure of what option might be best for you, here are some pros and cons of each. Now, I use a mix of these options, so don't feel like you have to limit yourself to one type. I originally started my Book of Shadows in this notebook, but now I've sort of found it's easier to log all of my spells, rituals, and correspondences digitally. I sort of use my notebook now for just sort of journal prompts relating to spirituality and understanding the ethics of my practice. So just do whatever works for you. If you need to split them up amongst different formats for different things, then that's totally fine. So now we have a fun part, which is personalization. The most important thing here is to go with what you like. Sometimes we can get a little bit caught up in perfectionism and making sure that we're sticking to like a set style. So make sure that however you decide to lay out your Book of Shadows, it's not draining to add to, and it makes it a relatively easy thing to do. Some witches might opt for a more minimalist style, whereas other people might want to opt for more creative styles. But whatever you choose to do, remember that you can always do your research first and then either rewrite it or reorganize it later. The first copy you make is almost certainly not going to be the finalized copy. So try not to get too caught up in the idea of the presentation. You can add certain decorative items to your pages. Like for example, I've seen a lot of people use pressed flowers either as decoration, or some people even use it for correspondences. If you're into scrapbooking, you can get creative and add pictures or tape or cut out bits of paper. I've only just recently started feeling confident drawing and adding stickers to my Book of Shadows. One comment I see a lot from beginner witches is, what do I write in my Book of Shadows first? And to be honest, there isn't really one right thing that you can put in there. I have made a downloadable sheet that you can use as an introduction to your Book of Shadows if you are struggling with that. It's essentially an introduction to your craft, including your goals, dedications, and what you would like your practice to be. So I will link that below if you are interested in that. Some people like the idea of starting their Book of Shadows with an index or a table of contents, but whilst that is ideal for a binder or a digital option, I can almost guarantee that you're going to come back to a section multiple times as you research it, so it can be a bit hard to write that in a notebook and then have a set amount of pages for a section when you might want to add to it in future. The one thing you don't want to do is limit yourself to a set number of pages on research or a topic. One section I highly recommend that you add to your Book of Shadows is a research section. God, that was a mouthful. Research section. This can be at the back of your book, or if you have a digital copy, that can be tucked away somewhere. And on top of that, you can also track the progress of how much you have researched a topic, which is super helpful if you would like a visual representation of how much research you've actually done. I find this especially helpful if I've seen something online, like on WitchTok, that I kind of want to research a bit more. You might have some further questions on a topic that you want answered, but not necessarily the time to research at that moment. So having this visual list of questions and how far you are with your research can be really helpful to reference later when you have the time to do that research. Outside of those things, I will put on the screen some research prompts or topics that you might want to include in your Book of Shadows. Now bear in mind, this is just an example. There are so many more topics that you can include, but this is something to get you started. This is an example of what my digital Book of Shadows looks like at current. Like I've said, I do use Notion. I do plan to make this a downloadable template in future, so if you would like that, do let me know in the comments. As I mentioned previously, I've been using my notebook journal to go through journal prompts, and I've been using the Rebel Witch by Kellyanne Maddox journal prompts. I found them to be really insightful, and it asks questions that you wouldn't necessarily think about. I did go into this in one of my recent videos on TikTok, but I found this to be really fun to do if you're a little bit exhausted with researching and you want to do a bit more like introspective research of yourself, like your ethics and what you would like your practice to be. I highly recommend this book to anyone on their journey. It doesn't just have to be a beginner. So if you're looking for something to fill up your Book of Shadows really quickly, those prompts have really helped me fill up my Book of Shadows easily and quickly. And just as a note, if you're enjoying this video so far, then be sure to hit subscribe. I create witchy content like this to support your practice, so stick around if that's helpful for you. Now I know I've mentioned so many times that the Book of Shadows does not have any set rules, but I personally have strict rules when it comes to blending certain information together. I avoid blending two topics together, and that is shadow work and journaling about negative situations and my magical and spiritual research. This is because of the vibrational frequency of words, which suggests that words carry a unique energy that can influence our emotions or behaviour. Now, I'm not entirely sure how strongly I believe in that, but what I do believe is that if I was to be flicking through my Book of Shadows to find a spell or a ritual, and I come across something that was triggering or traumatizing from shadow work, that wouldn't put me in the right mindset to do the spell. I don't particularly want to be doing research or flicking through my Book of Shadows and be reminded of something not very nice. So if you're someone who likes to do journaling or shadow work, I highly suggest getting your own book for that, because some of the topics can be quite heavy. Another tip I highly suggest is citing your sources. This can be a little bit of a pain in the butt when you're writing it in a notebook because you have to write the whole link out. That's another reason why I suggest digital. But as a beginner, I wrote things in my Book of Shadows that I don't even know where they're from. I recently was looking back at some correspondences that I wrote down in my first journal, and I didn't even know if they were my own correspondences or from a particular folklore or website. I don't even know where they come from. So take it from someone who's made the mistake. Always cite your sources if you can, because it will be helpful in the future. Now, some witches don't have the luxury of being out and open in their practice. They have to remain in the broom closet, even if they are in their own home. So it needs to be said that if you are in the broom closet, then you need to prioritize your safety. Whilst a Book of Shadows is incredibly helpful, if you're someone who has very little privacy or someone that lives with them that will snoop through their belongings or devices, then I suggest waiting until you move out or away from that person to start your Book of Shadows. With that said, there are certain things that you can do to protect your Book of Shadows, like keep it hidden or password protected. But like I've said, your safety is more important than anything else. You're not hiding, you're protecting your practice and your power. I know I've said that there are no rules with a Book of Shadows, but there is kind of a guideline that people follow with their Book of Shadows, and that is to not let just anyone look at your journal. It's believed that you should only show people that you wholeheartedly trust and consent to. This is because your Book of Shadows is deeply personal and it's considered to be very sacred. Now, there is a notion that I've seen going around on WitchTok that if someone's looking at your Book of Shadows, they will know how you do all of your spells and they can undo it if they see your Book of Shadows, but it's extremely unlikely that that is going to happen to you, and it's kind of a bit of a bizarre thought process to begin with. The biggest thing here I would just say is that you need to meet your Book of Shadows with respect and only show it to people that value you and your practice. And another thing to add to that, withholding respect for your Book of Shadows, is to look after it. Try your best not to burn it or spill anything on it. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I don't know if you can see. I have burnt and spilled things many times over, but it's mainly about just meeting your Book of Shadows with respect. Like I've said, treat it like a sacred text. But again, do whatever you like. Now, a Book of Shadows isn't just for writing in and keeping on the shelf. It can be used actively in your practice. You can reference it during spell work, rituals, if you're crafting oils, or even doing kitchen witchery. You can keep your Book of Shadows on your altar if that's where you do a lot of your workings, just to have easy access. But obviously, if you're doing a digital version, then having it on your phone will be handy because it will always be with you. You can update the book after a ritual if you've made a bit of a discovery on what works well, or after any of the sabbats or life events. And one thing I and probably many other witches like to do is revisit some of your old entries to see how far you've come. Some good days to do this are on any of the sabbats or the Witch's New Year. Now, it's important to remember that you will make mistakes, you will make changes, and that is a good thing. You can cross things out, you can tear pages out, or you can rewrite them. Your path will always be evolving, and so will your Book of Shadows. You may find that your views or code of ethics change, or that some information that you wrote in there was incorrect and you want to revise it. You're not at Hogwarts, okay? Nobody's grading your Book of Shadows, it's just for you. Don't be too critical on yourself. This is your journey, and it's not going to be a massive issue if you decide to change things. Now, one big thing I feel is important to mention is finding reliable sources. Sometimes you might come across a source which is misinformation, unsafe, simply incorrect, or just can't be trusted, and you might not always know if that is happening. So this is where I suggest a few things. The first is further research. It can be as simple as double checking the information through a simple Google search to see if other people are saying the same things, or checking out a practitioner's other information to see if it's valid. Since being on WitchTok, which is unfortunately full of a lot of misinformation, I have taken the liberty of actually making a criteria that you can use to check if information is valid. It's heavily inspired by the CRAP test, but you can download it below. It will explain how you can use it and let you know whether information should be trusted or not. It is called the Simple Test, and it is a criteria of just simply asking yourself a few questions to see if a source is reliable. So that is below if you would like it, and I do highly suggest that you use it. Now, as I've mentioned, you can divvy your Book of Shadows up into different formats. For example, you could have a very organized binder with all the correspondences to certain herbs and flowers inside it that is nice and organized. And then you could also have a notebook like me, which you use to explore your spirituality and your code of ethics. And then you could also have a digital copy with your spells and rituals that you can take anywhere, or any sources that are linked directly in your digital copy for easy access. It's entirely up to you how you decide to format your notes. It's only going to benefit you, so if it's outside of the norm, then that's fine. Another way you can format your Book of Shadows to be helpful is by annotating or indexing. This can be through sticky notes, tabs, just writing on the page, and particularly in the case of a binder, you can add clear pockets or dividers. For example, if you opt for a notepad or binder version and you want to access a spell or ritual notes while you're performing the spell, it can be really easy to just have a tab on your book for spells and rituals and just quickly get to it. Now, there are some magical elements that you can add to your Book of Shadows. These aren't essential, but some people, for example, like to spell their Book of Shadows so that if someone opens it against their will, there are some repercussions. Alternatively, you could spell your Book of Shadows to be disguised and difficult for someone to find other than yourself. You could work with particular coloured pages or pens in certain sections to bring certain intentions. You could also use infused paper if you would like to. Similarly to how you would make infused paper with coffee, you could use specific herbs for certain intentions, or you could even make handmade paper with dried herbs pressed into them. You can go as mystical or minimal as you would like. Thank you so much for watching this walkthrough. I really hope it's helped ease some of that overwhelm and hopefully spark some inspiration. Whichever method you choose, try your best not to overthink it. Remember that your Book of Shadows is yours and it's a place for empowerment, not perfectionism and being critical of yourself. If you found this video helpful, I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, what are you going to put in your Book of Shadows first? Thank you so much again for watching, and I hope you have fun delving into your Book of Shadows.